heard my son and his wife whispering in the kitchen, "She'll never know what hit her." They laughed. I didn't say a word. The next morning they came for breakfast and found the locks changed, their stuff on the lawn, and the police waiting, because I knew exactly what was coming. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax, let's begin. I could not sleep. This was not unusual. At my age, sleep is a fickle companion. I rose, my robe familiar around my shoulders, and decided on tea. The house was dark and quiet, the kind of quiet that holds its breath. My slippers made no sound on the stairs. A line of light cut across the dark hallway floor from the kitchen door, which was open just a crack. I paused. I heard their voices, my son, David, and his wife, Chloe. They were supposed to be asleep in the guest room. I moved closer without deciding to. The old floorboard near the refrigerator did not creak. I stood in the shadow of the hallway, a spectator in my own home. "It's perfect," Chloe's voice was a low, thrilled whisper. "She'll never know what hit her." A soft male laugh, David's laugh. "You're sure about the lawyer? He can get it done?" "Absolutely. The paperwork is straightforward. We establish power of attorney based on her declining capacity. Once that's signed, we have control. Then we can make the decisions that need to be made." My hand found the wall. The plaster was cool and solid. "It just feels fast," David said. His voice lacked conviction. "Fast? David, this house is prime real estate. It's a gold mine just sitting here, paid off with an old woman rattling around in it. We could leverage it, buy the new construction in Brookfield, start fresh. This is for our future. She's had her time here." The words "old woman" hung in the air like a poison. "I am 62. I know." David sighed. "It's just, she seems fine." "She's not fine. She's forgetful. She's slow. We can build a case. A few notes to her doctor about her confusion. The lawyer said it's all about perception, and once we have control, we can sell this place. She won't need a big house. A nice, manageable assisted living facility would be safer for her." I closed my eyes. Assisted living. A euphemism for a box where they would store me away, my life's work sold to fund their upgrade. "And she won't fight it?" David asked. Chloe's tone was dismissive. "How? She trusts you. She'll sign what you put in front of her. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be done. She'll be grateful we're taking care of everything." I could picture her face, the sharp, pleased angles of it in the kitchen light. I could see David's profile, nodding slowly, being persuaded, being complicit. "Okay," he said, the word final. "Okay, let's do it. For our future." "That's my guy," Chloe said. I heard the sound of a kiss. A cabinet door closed softly. "We'll talk to the lawyer tomorrow. Start the process." I backed away. One careful step, then another. My heart was a hard, cold stone in my chest. The shock was not a wave. It was an absence of feeling, a void where my love for my son had been just minutes before. I retraced my path through the dark. I did not want tea anymore. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed. The street lamp outside cast a pale grid on the floor. This room, this house. I bought it with the life insurance money after Marcus died. David was 8. Every board, every patch of paint, every flower in the garden represented a choice, a sacrifice, a hope. I raised a man in this house. I read stories in this room. I cried in this room. I built a life of quiet certainty, and he wanted to trade it for a down payment. The numbness began to recede, replaced by a clarity so sharp it was painful. Declining capacity. I am a retired school librarian. My mind is a cataloged, orderly place. I remember the call numbers for the entire Dewey Decimal System. I remember the names of every child who ever won the Summer Reading Challenge. Forgetful? Slow? I chose my moments of silence. I measured my words. They mistook contemplation for decay. I replayed the conversation, the specific terms. Power of attorney, doctor's notes, perception. They had a plan, a legal, cold, methodical plan to dismantle my autonomy and take my home. They saw me as a problem to be solved, an obstacle. The pain arrived then, a physical ache behind my ribs. My only child, the boy I fed and taught and cheered for. He sat in my kitchen and agreed to erase me. He laughed. I looked at my hands in the dim light. They were capable hands. They had shelved 10,000 books. They had planted 100 azaleas. They had held my son when he was scared of thunderstorms. A strange calm settled over me. It was the calm of a decision made. The hurt was there, a deep, permanent crack in my foundation, but it was contained. I would not weep. Weeping was for a loss. I was not lost yet. They thought I would never know what hit me. Chloe was right. I would not know because I would see it coming. I would be standing to the side, watching it pass by to hit them instead. I lay back down. I did not sleep. I planned. The library of my mind opened and I began to research. Not books this time, but strategies. First, I needed information. I needed to act normally. I needed them to believe their target was still oblivious, a sweet old woman making pancakes. I needed time. When the first gray light of dawn touched the window, I rose. I made my bed with precise corners. I dressed in my normal clothes. I listened to the sounds of them moving about in the guest room. I took a deep breath. I arranged my face into its usual gentle expression. The game had begun. They just did not know they were already losing. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the kitchen. It was a familiar, comforting smell. I moved through the routine of breakfast with automatic hands. Crack the eggs, whisk the batter, heat the griddle. Each action was a stitch in the fabric of normalcy I was weaving. I could hear them in the dining room, their voices bright and false. "Smells amazing, Mom," David called out. "Thank you, Eleanor," Chloe added, her tone sweet as artificial sweetener. I placed the stack of pancakes in the center of the table. I sat down. I looked at them. My son, his wife. Their faces were open, smiling. I saw the calculation behind David's eyes, the smug satisfaction in Chloe's slight smile. They thought they were looking at the final obstacle, soon to be removed. "Sleep well?" I asked, pouring maple syrup. "Like a rock," David said, cutting into his food. "This guest bed is great." "It's the quiet," Chloe said. "So peaceful out here." Peaceful. Yes. The peace before the ambush. I took a bite. The food tasted like nothing. "So, what's on the agenda today?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Another day of house hunting?" They exchanged a quick glance. "Actually," David said, wiping his mouth, "we have a meeting later this morning with a financial advisor to talk about some long-term planning." Long-term planning. My long-term specifically. I nodded slowly as if considering it. That sounds responsible. It's good to think ahead. "Exactly," Chloe jumped in, leaning forward. "You have to be proactive. The world isn't kind to people who don't plan." Her gaze flickered to me, then away. The subtext was clear. "I suppose not," I said. "Where's the meeting?" "Over in the city," David said vaguely. "We'll probably be gone most of the day." "Well, don't worry about me," I said, and I offered a small, gentle smile, the kind they expected. "I actually have plans myself. I'm going to spend the day with Myra. She's been wanting help sorting through some old photo albums. I told her I'd come over after breakfast." The relief in the room was palpable. They didn't try to hide it. My absence would give them free rein to plot with their lawyer. It was perfect for them. "That's wonderful, Mom," David said, genuine warmth in his voice for the first time. It was the warmth of convenience. "You should get out more. Have fun with your friend." "I will," I said. "I'll probably stay for lunch, maybe even a late dinner. Don't feel you need to rush back on my account." "Are you sure?" Chloe asked, trying to sound concerned. "We don't want you to be alone here at night if we're late." "I've been alone in this house for 20 years, dear," I said, my tone even. "I think I can manage one evening. You two focus on your meeting." They accepted this easily, too easily. The rest of breakfast passed with chatter about nothing, the weather, a movie they'd seen. I participated just enough. I watched David's hands. They were his father's hands. I watched Chloe's eyes, which never quite met mine for more than a second. I cleared the plates. I washed the dishes. I performed the sacrament of mundane routine. When they left, showering me with hollow goodbyes and promises to call later, I stood at the door and waved. I watched David's car back out of the driveway. I kept the smile on my face until the car turned the corner and disappeared. Then I let it fall. The house was silent. It was a different silence now. It was no longer peaceful. It was expectant, complicit. I went upstairs. I did not go to my room. I went to the guest room, their room. The bed was unmade. Chloe's expensive perfume lingered in the air. A charger was plugged into the wall. I opened the closet. Their clothes hung there, temporary intruders. On the nightstand, I saw a notepad. I did not touch it. I merely looked. The top page was blank, but the impression of writing was visible on the sheet beneath. I held it to the light at an angle. I could make out fragments, petition for medical evaluation, and a phone number with a 212 area code. The city. I placed the pad back exactly as I found it. I did not need to take it. I had seen enough. I returned to my bedroom. From the back of my walk-in closet, I retrieved a small, hard-shell suitcase. I packed with efficiency. 2 days of comfortable clothing, my toiletries, my medication, my laptop and its charger, my external hard drive, where I kept scanned copies of every important document I owned, but I would need the originals. That was for later. I dressed in practical slacks and a sturdy sweater. I fixed my hair. I looked at myself in the mirror. A black woman in her early 60s, silver gray hair swept back, face lined with experience. They saw softness. They saw a woman fading. I saw a librarian who knew how to find anything, who understood systems, who had spent a lifetime maintaining order. I saw a mother who had fought quieter, harder battles than this. I took one last look around my bedroom. Then I wheeled the suitcase downstairs. I collected my purse, my keys. I did not look back. The drive to Myra's house was 15 minutes through streets I had known for decades. Myra and I had taught at the same high school. She was the history teacher to my librarian. We had shared countless lunches, weathered the same storms. Her house was a small, cheerful bungalow with a riotous flower garden even in the fall. I pulled into her driveway. Before I could even ring the bell, the front door opened. Myra stood there, her reading glasses on top of her head. She took in my face, the suitcase beside me. Her own expression shifted from welcome to immediate, deep concern. "Nora," she said, "what's happened?" That was all it took. The careful control, the icy calm I had maintained since the slice of light in the hallway cracked. Not shattered, but cracked. A single tear escaped, tracing a hot path down my cheek. I wiped it away with an impatient hand. "They're trying to take my house, Myra," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tear. "David and Chloe. They have a lawyer. They want to declare me incompetent." Myra's eyes widened. Then they narrowed. She stepped aside, holding the door open wide. "Get in here," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Right now. Bring your bag. You're staying." I wheeled the suitcase over her threshold. She closed the door firmly behind us, shutting out the world where I was a problem to be solved. Here, in the cluttered warmth of her home, filled with books and crocheted blankets and the smell of lemon polish, I was simply Nora, and I was about to go to war. Myra's kitchen was a landscape of comfort and controlled chaos. Mugs crowded the drain board. Piles of books teetered on the counter. The table was buried under newspapers and a half-completed crossword. She swept a space clear with her arm. "Sit," she commanded, filling the kettle. "Start from the beginning. Leave nothing out." I sat. The familiar vinyl of her kitchen chair creaked. I told her everything. The sleepless night. The slice of light. The exact phrases. She'll never know what hit her. Declining capacity. Prime real estate. Assisted living. I spoke in a flat, factual tone, as if reading a report. Myra listened without interruption, her back to me as she prepared 2 cups of strong black tea. When I finished, she placed a mug in front of me and sat down heavily. "That little weasel," she said, her voice thick with a fury I was too numb to feel. "And that venomous piece of work he married. I knew she was trouble. I knew it." "Knowing doesn't matter now," I said. "They have a lawyer. They are initiating a process. I need to initiate a faster one." Myra nodded, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Okay, first principle. You are not declining anything. You are sharp as a tack. Second principle. That house is yours, free and clear. We prove those 2 things. Their house of cards collapses. What do you need?" I took a sip of tea. The heat was grounding. "I need my documents, the deed, the title insurance, my current will, my financial statements. They're in my safe deposit box. I need to speak with my attorney, not theirs. And I think I need to create a record, a formal record of their intent, before they can spin their narrative." Myra was already reaching for a notepad and pen from the junk drawer. She slid them across to me. "Make a list, a timeline. Then we make calls." I began to write. The action was mechanical, organizing chaos into bullet points. It felt like my old work, creating a catalog for a new shipment of books. 1. Retrieve originals from Box 742. 2. Contact Alan Barrett, Esky. 3. Establish preemptive record with authorities. My handwriting was steady. "Who's your lawyer?" Myra asked. "Alan Barrett. He did the will for me after Marcus died. He's old school, thorough. Call him." I took out my phone. I found his office number. My finger hovered over the screen. For a moment, the professional mask slipped, and I was just a mother whose heart had been ripped out. I looked at Myra. She met my gaze and gave a single firm nod. I pressed call. The receptionist put me through. "Nora?" Alan Barrett's voice was a dry, familiar rasp. "It's been a while. Everything all right?" "No, Alan, it is not," I said, and I explained concisely. My son and daughter-in-law were in my home. I had overheard them discussing a plan to petition for guardianship or power of attorney based on false claims of diminished capacity. Their goal was to gain control of my property. I gave him their names. I mentioned the impression of notes on a legal pad referencing a petition and a medical evaluation. There was a long silence on the other end, then a low whistle. "I see. And you are, in your own estimation, currently of sound mind? I am calling you to strategically protect my assets from fraud, Alan. What is your assessment?" A faint chuckle. "Point taken. Okay. First, you are the sole owner on the deed. No joint tenancy. Your will currently leaves the house and the majority of your estate to David, correct?" "It does. That needs to change today." "It can be changed. We'll do a codicil or a new one entirely. More importantly, we need to fortress your position. Do you have your documents?" "I'm going to my safe deposit box within the hour." "Good. Bring them to my office. We'll make certified copies. We will also draft a sworn affidavit from you, detailing the conversation you overheard, dated today. We will notarize it. This creates a contemporaneous record of your mental clarity and their malicious intent. It is a preemptive strike. If they file anything, we file this immediately in response." "What about the police?" I asked. "You can file an informational report with the local precinct's non-emergency line. Document your concern about a potential financial fraud in progress. You are not asking them to arrest anyone. You are creating a paper trail. It adds official weight. Do you want me to be present when you confront them?" I considered this. "Not yet. I need to handle the physical space first, but soon I will need you after." "Understood, Nora. I'm sorry this is happening." "Thank you, Alan. I'll be at your office by 2 o'clock. I hung up. I relayed the conversation to Myra. She was already putting on her coat. Safe deposit box first. I'm driving. The next call was to the non-emergency line for the local police. I was transferred to a desk sergeant. I gave my name and address. I stated clearly that I believed my son and his wife, who were currently guests in my home, were conspiring to defraud me by attempting to falsely declare me incapacitated in order to seize control of my property. I said I was of sound mind, had just consulted my attorney, and wished to make a report to establish a timeline of my concerns in case any legal petitions were filed against me. The sergeant took notes. He asked a few procedural questions. He confirmed they would not send a car at this time, but that a file was now open with my statement. He gave me a case number. I wrote it down on Myra's notepad. It was done. The first moves were made on the board. Myra drove. I sat in the passenger seat looking out at the passing streets. The emotional storm was held at bay by a dam of procedure, lists, calls, case numbers, affidavits. This was a language I understood. It was the language of order. We parked at the bank. I went inside alone. The manager knew me. He led me to the vault. I used my key. The box slid out. Inside were the physical testaments of my life's work, the deed to my house, the title insurance policy, the paid-off mortgage documents, my will, my marriage certificate, my husband's death certificate, the birth certificate of the son who was now plotting against me. I took it all. I placed the documents in a large envelope Myra had given me. Holding the envelope felt different than I expected. It did not feel like clutching memories. It felt like arming myself. These were not sentimental papers. They were shields. They were weapons. I returned to the car. Got everything? Myra asked. Everything that matters, I said. She started the engine. To the lawyers? To the lawyers, I confirmed. The calm inside me was no longer the calm of shock. It was the calm of a librarian who has just located every necessary reference text. The research was complete. Now, it was time to write the paper. Alan Barrett's office was in a brick building downtown, the kind of place that spoke of quiet, established success. Myra waited in the car. "This is your play," she said. "I'll be right here." I walked in alone, the envelope of documents held firmly against my chest. The receptionist ushered me into Alan's office immediately. It was a room of leather and wood, shelves lined with thick legal volumes. Alan stood up from behind a large, orderly desk. He was a man in his 70s with thin white hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Nora," he said, coming around to shake my hand. His grip was dry and strong. "Let's see what we have." I laid the contents of the envelope on his desk. He picked up the deed first, scanning it with a practiced eye. Sole owner, Eleanor R. Washington. No liens, no encumbrances. He set it down and picked up my current will, the one naming David as my sole heir and executor. He read it through silently. "This is the instrument they are trying to make irrelevant. If they control you, they control this, and by extension, the house, without waiting." "I want a new one," I said. My voice was clear in the quiet room. I assumed as much. "The question is terms. You have other beneficiaries in mind?" I had thought about this during the car ride. I want the house and 70% of my liquid assets to go to the community foundation, earmarked for their adult literacy program, 20% to Myra Higgins, 10% to establish a small scholarship at the high school where I worked for a student pursuing library sciences. I paused. I want David explicitly named and disinherited. I want the reason stated as attempted fraud and betrayal of fiduciary trust. Alan made a note on a legal pad. "We can do that. The explicit disinheritance with cause is unusual but not unheard of. It strengthens our position that you are of sound and specific mind. It makes any claim of incapacity look even more frivolous. Now, the affidavit." He called in his assistant, a young woman with a professional demeanor. She brought a laptop. "We'll draft it together," Alan said. "You will state the facts, just the facts. Date, time, location." What you heard verbatim as best you recall, your subsequent actions, your understanding of their intent. We will print it, you will sign it, and Marcy here will notarize it. This document is a shield. If they file a petition tomorrow, we file this an hour later, and their case evaporates in a cloud of bad faith. We began. I dictated in the same flat tone I had used with Myra. On the night of October 17th, I awoke and went downstairs. I observed a light under the kitchen door. I heard the voices of my son, David Washington, and his wife, Chloe. I recited the phrases. I described the notepad impression. I listed my actions the following day: consulting my attorney, retrieving my documents, filing a police informational report. It took 20 minutes. The document was 3 pages long. It was cold, precise, and devastating. Marcy printed it. I read it over carefully. Every word was true. Signing it felt like laying down a cornerstone. "Pen?" I said. Alan handed me a heavy, expensive fountain pen. I signed my name at the bottom of each page, Eleanor R. Washington. The signature was identical to the one on my deed from 30 years ago, steady, unwavering. Marcy applied her notary stamp and signature with a series of sharp clicks. "Now, the will," Alan said. "We can execute a codicil, an amendment today, but given the severity of the change, I recommend a completely new document. It removes any ambiguity. I have a template. We can adapt it." We worked for another hour. The language was legalese, but its meaning was brutal in its clarity. I intentionally make no provision for my son, David Michael Washington, or his wife, Chloe Elizabeth Washington, due to their actions and attempts to undermine my autonomy and appropriate my assets. When it was ready, I signed it. 2 witnesses from the office staff were called in. They signed. Marcy notarized. Alan executed it as well. He made 2 copies, placing the original in his fireproof vault. He handed 1 copy to me. "This is now your last will and testament. The previous one is null." I held the copy. It was just paper. But it was also a door, slammed shut and bolted. "What's your next move, Nora?" Alan asked, leaning back in his chair. "I am revoking their invitation," I said. "They are guests in my home. That status ends today. I will secure the premises. I will remove their belongings. Then I will formally ask them to leave. If they refuse, the police have the case number." He nodded slowly, a look of professional admiration in his eyes. "You've done everything right. You've moved first. You've documented everything. You are now the plaintiff in this story, not the defendant. That is a powerful place to be. Do you need a peace officer present for the actual removal?" "I have arranged for one to be nearby at the appropriate time," I said. I had not yet, but I would. The plan was crystallizing. Good. Remember, the law is on your side. Property rights are fundamental. A mother's broken heart is not a legal cause of action, but trespassing is. Focus on the property. His voice softened just a fraction. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this. Thank you, Alan. So am I." I left his office, the new will and the affidavit in my possession, along with the certified copies of my deed. The sun was lower in the sky. The afternoon was waning. Myra was reading a book in the driver's seat. She looked up as I got in. "Well, it's done," I said, placing the folder on my lap. "I am no longer his mother in any legal sense that matters, and I have a sworn statement of their conspiracy." Myra started the car. "Then let's go get your house back." The calm that settled over me now was different from all the others. It was not the calm of shock or of procedure or of research. It was the calm of execution. The legal foundation was poured and set. Now it was time to build the walls. And the first step was changing every lock. The locksmith's van was in my driveway when Myra dropped me off. A man in a gray uniform stood waiting on the porch. I had called them from Alan Barrett's parking lot, requesting an emergency re-key of all exterior doors. I gave Myra a nod. She squeezed my hand. I'll be on standby. Call if you need muscle. I have all the muscle I need right now, I said, holding up the new keys Alan had given me for his office files. They were a metaphor, but a concrete one. I got out of the car. The locksmith, Joe, according to his badge, was efficient and incurious. All exterior doors, deadbolts and handles. All of them, front, back, garage side door. I want all the old locks rendered inoperable and the old keys returned to me. My tone was that of a homeowner giving a standard order. He accepted it as such. Yes, ma'am, it'll take about an hour. Proceed. I let him in. The house was as I had left it, but the air felt different. It was no longer my sanctuary that had been violated. It was a site to be reclaimed. I watched as Joe removed the front door lock first. The sound of his tools was sharp and purposeful. I went to the kitchen and called the number for a local storage facility. I rented a small, climate-controlled unit for 1 month, paid with my credit card. I gave them my name. I did not need the unit for long, just long enough to create plausible deniability about discarding their things. Next, I went to the basement. I brought up a stack of flattened cardboard moving boxes I had saved from years of online orders. I also brought up a roll of packing tape and a marker. Joe was working on the back door. The metallic clicks and scrapes were the soundtrack of my reclamation. I started in the guest room. I opened the closet. I took down David's suits first, one by one. I laid them on the bed. I did not smell them or hold them to my face. I folded them with the impersonal efficiency of a dry cleaning clerk, placed them in a box, and sealed it. I wrote David, suits, on the side with the marker. Next, his shirts, his trousers, his shoes went into another box. Chloe's section was more voluminous. Dresses, blouses, expensive jeans. I handled her silk blouses without ceremony, folding them into rectangles. Her array of shoes filled a box by themselves. Her cosmetics and perfumes from the bathroom went into a smaller box cushioned with bath towels. I worked without pause. The physical labor was a relief. It was a task with a clear beginning, middle, and end. Empty the drawers, empty the closet, strip the bed of their linens, pack the chargers, the books, the spare glasses. I found the notepad. I did not pack it. I left it on the bare nightstand. Joe called from the hallway. All done, ma'am. He presented me with 2 sets of new keys, 4 each, and a small bag containing the old lock mechanisms and the original keys. These won't work anymore, he said, pointing to the old keys. Perfect. I paid him in cash from the emergency fund I kept in the house. He tipped his hat and left. The sound of the van driving away was followed by absolute silence. Then I locked the front door with the new key. The click was solid, definitive. I repeated the process with the back door, the garage door. Each click was a period at the end of a sentence. I returned to the guest room. The bed was a bare mattress. The closet was empty. 6 cardboard boxes stood against the wall, neatly labeled. 2 suitcases, which they had brought, were by the door. I dragged everything out into the hallway. I took a break. I drank a glass of water in my kitchen, looking at the backyard where David had played as a boy. The swing set was gone, but the oak tree he'd climbed still stood. I finished the water. Sentiment was a luxury for later. The next phase was the rest of the house. They had colonized small spaces, a toothbrush in the main bathroom, a razor, their preferred coffee blend in the pantry, a laptop charger plugged in the living room. I gathered these items into a shopping bag. I checked every room. I was systematic, like doing a final inventory before closing a library. In the living room, I paused. On the mantel was a framed photo of David's college graduation. He was in his cap and gown, his arm around me, both of us smiling. I took the frame off the mantel. I opened the back, removed the photograph, and placed it in a drawer of my desk. I put the empty frame back on the mantel. It was not a symbolic gesture. It was a practical one. The photo was mine. The memory was mine. The frame was just glass and wood. The doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. It was Myra, holding 2 large paper bags. I unlocked the door, the new lock smooth and firm, and let her in. I come bearing supplies, she said, marching to the kitchen. She unpacked the bags, sandwiches, a thermos of soup, more tea bags, and a box of heavy-duty black trash bags. "For anything you don't want a box," she said, noting my gaze. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Eat. You need fuel." We ate at the kitchen island, surrounded by the silent evidence of my labor. I told her about the will, the affidavit, the storage unit. She listened while chewing her sandwich. "So the legal fence is built. The physical fence is built," she said, gesturing with her chin toward the new locks. "Now you need to put their stuff outside the fence." "Yes." "When?" "Tonight. I want it done before they return. I want them to come back to a closed door and their life in boxes on the lawn." Myra's eyes gleamed. "I'll help you drag the boxes out, but you should leave the suitcases by the door." A final touch. After we ate, we moved the boxes from the hallway to the front lawn. We did it in stages under the fading afternoon light. No one saw us. The neighborhood was quiet. We placed the boxes in a neat, orderly row beside the walkway. It looked like a bizarre, minimalist sculpture. The suitcases I placed prominently at the front of the stack. We stood back on the porch. The sprinklers from the house next door came on with a sudden hiss, casting a faint mist. "It looks so normal," Myra said, "and so completely insane." "It is both," I agreed. The house was now a fortress. Their belongings were on the outside. The line was drawn. My hand closed around the new keys in my pocket. They were cool and sharp-edged. "What now?" Myra asked. "Now," I said, turning to go inside. "I invite them to breakfast." I watched Myra's taillights disappear around the corner. Then I turned to face my lawn. The row of boxes and the two suitcases sat under the porch light, which had just flickered on. The sprinklers next door had shut off, leaving the pavement dark and wet. The scene was absurd. It looked like a very polite eviction. I went inside and locked the door. The new deadbolt engaged with a satisfying thud. I walked through my house, now entirely mine again. The guest room was empty, the bathroom cleared of their products. I went to my bedroom and changed into comfortable clothes. I had work to do, but it was mental work now. I sat at the small desk in my living room, the one I used for paying bills. I took out my phone. I needed to craft the message. It had to be perfectly normal, yet irresistible. I typed, deleted, and retyped. Finally, I settled on. "David, forgot to give you something important before you left today. Come for breakfast tomorrow, 8 a.m. Love, Mom." I read it over. It was innocuous. It suggested a minor errand, a maternal impulse. The "love, Mom" was a necessary flourish, a bit of bait they would recognize and not question. They would assume it was a check, or a piece of family jewelry, or perhaps even a document I was spontaneously willing to sign. Their greed and their utter certainty of my ignorance would do the rest. I pressed send. The message whooshed away into the digital ether, heading straight to the son who had laughed in my kitchen. Now, for the other call. I found the case number the desk sergeant had given me. I dialed the non-emergency line again. It was picked up after 2 rings. Sergeant Hill. "Sergeant Hill, this is Eleanor Washington. I called earlier today regarding a potential fraud case involving my son." I gave him the case number. "Yes, Mrs. Washington, I have your file here. What can I do for you?" "The situation is coming to a head tomorrow morning. I have asked my son and his wife to meet me at my home at 8 a.m. to discuss matters. Based on their prior conversations, which I documented, I believe they may become confrontational when they realize their plans are compromised. I do not expect violence, but I would like an officer present to keep the peace and to formally advise them that they are no longer welcome on the property. Would it be possible to have an officer stop by at approximately 8:15 a.m.? There was a rustle of paper. "You're requesting a civil standby, essentially, to prevent a breach of the peace during a tenant eviction?" "They are not tenants. They are guests whose invitation I am revoking. Their personal effects are already removed from the home. I simply want an official presence to document the revocation of invitation and to ensure they leave peacefully. Understood. We can do that. An officer will be at your address at 8:15 tomorrow morning. I'll make a note on the file. Please understand the officer is there to observe and keep the peace, not to mediate a family dispute. That is all I require. Thank you, Sergeant. I hung up. The machinery was now in motion. My invitation, their predictable avarice, the scheduled arrival of the law. It was a simple sequence of cause and effect. I stood up and walked to the front window. I parted the curtain just enough to look out. The boxes were still there, a stark geometry on the grass. Across the street, in the house owned by the Millers, I saw a living room curtain fall back into place. A moment later, in the Johnsons' house to the left, a shadow moved behind an upstairs blind. The neighborhood was watching. The silent, observant ecosystem of the suburbs had noticed the anomaly on my lawn. There would be questions tomorrow, but that was fine. Let them watch. Let them see. I let the curtain fall closed. I was not hungry. I made a cup of tea and took it to the living room. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one that had been Marcus's. I did not turn on the television. I sat in the quiet and rehearsed. I thought about what I would say. I would not shout. I would not cry. I would state facts. I heard you. I know your plan. It has failed. You are no longer welcome here. I pictured their faces, David's initial confusion, then dawning horror, Chloe's shock turning to sputtering anger. I visualized the police cruiser pulling up. I saw the officer walking to the porch. The rehearsal was calm. I felt no anticipatory thrill, no vengeful glee. I felt the grim satisfaction of a complex equation solved correctly. The variables were accounted for. The proof was ready. My phone buzzed on the side table. A text message. From David. "Sure thing, Mom. We'll be there. Can't wait for your pancakes. Love you." I read the words. Love you. The phrase was a tool for them now, a lubricant for their scheme. It meant nothing. I did not reply. The exchange was complete. I finished my tea. I washed the cup and placed it in the drain board. I performed my nightly routine, checking the doors, turning off lights, setting the thermostat. Everything was in order. As I passed the front door, I reached out and touched the new deadbolt again, confirming its solidity. I went upstairs. I did not go into the guest room. I went straight to my own bed. I lay down in the dark. I thought about the boy David had been, the one who needed a nightlight, who believed his mother could fix anything. That boy was gone. The man who replaced him was a stranger who saw me as a financial instrument. I closed my eyes. I needed rest. Tomorrow required clarity, not fatigue. The emotional wave I had feared, the crushing grief, did not come. It was banked, buried under layers of action and procedure. There would be time for it later, perhaps, or perhaps it would simply remain as a permanent, dry hollow inside me. Either way, it would not interfere tomorrow. The last thing I thought before sleep took me was the image of my front lawn at dawn, the boxes waiting in the cool gray light. They were not just boxes. They were a boundary. And tomorrow, at 8 a.m., 2 people were going to walk right into it. The alarm did not wake me. I was already awake when it chimed at 5:30 a.m. I had slept, but it was a thin, alert sleep. I rose immediately. The house was still dark. I did not turn on the main lights. I used the small lamp on my nightstand. I made my bed with hospital corners, smoothing the quilt until not a single wrinkle remained. I showered. I dressed with deliberate care. I chose a simple, tailored navy blue dress, one I usually wore to church or important meetings. I put on pearl earrings, a single strand of pearls. I applied a light dusting of powder, a touch of lipstick. I fixed my silver gray hair into its usual neat bun. I looked in the mirror. I looked like Eleanor Washington, retired librarian, respected neighbor, mother. I looked impeccable. I looked unassailable. In the kitchen, I did not make pancakes. I made coffee. The smell was strong and familiar. I drank 1 cup, black, at the island. I watched the sky through the window lighten from black to deep blue, then to a pale gray. The boxes on the lawn were becoming visible, amorphous shapes in the dawn. At 7 a.m., I called Myra. She answered on the first ring. "Status? All quiet. They will be here at 8. The police at 8:15. "Do you want me there?" "No, this is between me and them. But stay by the phone. I may need you after." "I'll be here. Nora, are you ready?" I looked at my hands wrapped around the coffee mug. They were steady. I have done the work. Now I deliver the results. I hung up. At 7:20 a.m., I called the non-emergency line one final time. I asked to confirm the officer's arrival for a civil standby at 8:15 a.m. at my address. The dispatcher confirmed it was logged. I thanked her and hung up. The legal and logistical machinery was oiled and in motion. Now there was only the waiting. I walked through the house one last time. It was spotless. Every surface was wiped clean. There was no sign they had ever been here, except for the ghostly impression on the notepad in the guest room, which I had left as evidence. I entered the guest room and stood in the center. The emptiness was absolute. It felt correct. I returned to the living room. I sat in the armchair that faced the front window. I did not turn on any lights. The rising sun provided enough illumination to see the room. I folded my hands in my lap. I breathed slowly. I did not think about the past. I did not think about childhood Christmases or school plays or proud graduation days. Those were archived memories, filed away. I thought about the immediate future. I rehearsed my lines. I heard you. The plan will not work. You are no longer welcome here. Your belongings are on the lawn. The officer will explain the trespassing laws. Simple, declarative sentences. No room for argument. No engagement with emotion. I was not there to discuss feelings. I was there to deliver a verdict. My phone, resting on the side table, lit up with a text at 7:45 a.m. It was from David. "On our way, running a few minutes early, actually. Be there in 10. Pancakes sound amazing." A cold ripple moved through my calm. They were early. The police were scheduled for 8:15. This changed the timing, but not the outcome. It meant the confrontation would be solely between us for approximately 15 minutes. I assessed this. It was a risk. They might become more agitated without an immediate official presence. But it also meant I would have more time to speak before the police arrived to formalize the eviction. I texted back one word. "Okay." I stood up. I walked to the front door. I did not unlock it. I looked through the peephole. The street was quiet. The morning paper lay at the end of the walkway. The boxes formed a silent, orderly barrier. I moved to the living room window and adjusted the curtain just enough to give me a view of the driveway. I stood there, waiting. The clock on the mantel ticked. Each second was measured slow. At 7:55 a.m., David's car turned onto the street. It moved slowly, then pulled into my driveway. The engine cut off. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's side door opened. David got out. He was smiling, saying something back to Chloe, who was emerging from the passenger side. He was dressed in casual clothes, looking well-rested, eager. He had his keys in his hand, his house keys, which included the one to my front door that no longer worked. They walked up the path together, side by side. David's eyes were on the front door. He did not look at the boxes to his left. His mind was on pancakes, on the something important I had for him, on the next step in their plan. Chloe was a step behind, smoothing her jacket. She glanced at the lawn and her step faltered. She stopped. She said something sharp to David, her hand shooting out to grab his arm. David stopped. He turned. He followed her gaze. His smile froze, then melted into confusion. He took a step toward the neat stack of boxes, his head tilting as he read his own name written in my steady hand on the cardboard. He reached out and touched one, as if to confirm it was real. I watched from the window. I saw the exact moment understanding began to dawn. His back stiffened. He looked from the boxes to the suitcases, then slowly his head turned toward the house. His eyes scanned the front windows. I did not move. I knew he could not see me in the dim interior. Chloe's voice, sharp and clear, pierced the morning quiet. "David, what is this?" He didn't answer her. He walked quickly to the front door, abandoning the path to step across the flower bed. He fumbled with his key ring, selected the correct key, and jammed it into the lock. It would not turn. He jiggled it. He pulled it out, looked at it, and tried again. He tried the doorknob itself. It was locked. He pressed the doorbell. I heard the chime echo through my silent house. I did not answer it. He knocked. A firm, polite knock. "Mom?" he called, his voice muffled by the door. "Mom, it's us. The door seems to be stuck." I remained where I was, watching. Chloe had joined him on the porch. Her face was a mask of incredulous anger. "It's not stuck," she hissed, though I could hear her. "The lock is different. Look at it." David bent to examine the deadbolt. He saw the new, unscratched brass of the mechanism. He straightened up. His face had lost all its color. The cheerful, confident man from the driveway was gone. In his place was a confused boy facing a locked door. He knocked again, harder. "Mom, open the door. What's going on? What is all this stuff?" This was my cue. The performance was beginning. I took a deep, quiet breath. I let the curtain fall back into place. I turned from the window. I walked to the front door. I did not hurry. I reached for the new key, which was on the hall table. I picked it up. I fitted it into the lock. The sound was loud in the hallway. On the other side of the door, the knocking stopped. They were listening. I turned the key. I disengaged the deadbolt. I turned the knob. I opened the door. The door opened. David stood there, his key still in his hand, hovering uselessly near the new lock. His face was a canvas of confusion, slowly being painted over with alarm. Chloe stood just behind his shoulder, her eyes wide, her mouth a thin, hard line. "Mom?" David's voice was high, strained. "What's going on? Why are our things out here? The door, the key doesn't work." I did not step back to let them in. I stood in the doorway, the solid wood of the door a barrier at my side. I held my new key in my other hand. I looked at him, then at her. I felt nothing but a cold, clear focus. "Your keys no longer work because I had the locks changed," I said. My voice was calm even. "Your belongings are on the lawn because I packed them. You are no longer welcome in my home." David blinked, as if the words were in a language he couldn't parse. "What? No longer? Mom, what are you talking about? This is crazy. Let us in. We can talk about this." He took a step forward, expecting me to yield. I did not move. "There is nothing to discuss. The conversation you had in my kitchen 2 nights ago was sufficient. I heard it all." The color drained completely from David's face. His jaw went slack. Chloe's hand tightened on his arm. "What conversation?" she said, her voice sharp, attempting to bluff. "Eleanor, I think you're confused. It's early. Maybe you had a bad dream." I turned my gaze to her. "I do not have bad dreams, Chloe. I have an excellent memory. I heard you say, 'She'll never know what hit her.' I heard you discuss power of attorney, declining capacity, prime real estate, and assisted living. I heard my son laugh and agree to your plan to defraud me." David made a small, choked sound. "Mom, no, it wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I interrupted, my tone still level. "I have sworn an affidavit detailing it, time-stamped and notarized yesterday. I have consulted my attorney. I have filed a report with the police. I have revoked your inheritance, and I have revoked your invitation to be in my house." The words landed, one after the other, like stones. David's eyes darted from my face to the boxes on the lawn, to the new lock, and back to me. The scale of my actions, the speed and thoroughness of them, began to dawn on him. This was not the reaction of a confused old woman. This was a systematic counterattack. You went to a lawyer?" he whispered. "Alan Barrett. He drafted a new will yesterday. You are disinherited for cause. He also notarized my statement. The police have a case number for the attempted fraud. Chloe finally found her voice, the faux concern evaporating into pure fury. This is insane. You can't do this. We're family. David, tell her. But David was crumbling. The charming, confident facade was gone, revealing a weak, stunned core. Mom, please, he said, his voice cracking. We were just talking, planning for the future. We were worried about you. We thought you might need help. You thought I needed to be removed from my home so you could sell it, I corrected. That is not help. That is theft. The discussion is over. You will take your belongings and you will leave. Do not attempt to enter this house again. You're kicking us out? David said, as if the concept was physically impossible. Where are we supposed to go? That is not my concern. You should have considered that before you conspired to make me homeless. You have a car, you have credit cards, you have each other. Chloe stepped forward, trying to peer past me into the house. Our laptops are in there, our documents. Your personal electronics and any important papers were packed. They are in the boxes. Everything else has been removed. The house is empty of you. I want to check, she demanded, trying to push past me. I did not flinch. I held my ground in the doorway. You are not entering. This is my property. You are now trespassing. The word trespassing hung in the air. It was a legal term, a cold term. It severed the last filament of familial pretense. David looked sick. He was finally understanding the new reality. He was not a son coming home. He was an intruder on the lawn. A curtain twitched in the Miller's house across the street, another in the Johnsons'. The neighborhood was having its morning coffee, and the show on my lawn was more compelling than the news. Mom, please, David tried again, a desperate whine entering his voice. Can't we just come in and talk? We can explain, we can fix this. There is nothing to fix, I said. You broke it. I have simply cleared away the debris. Now you need to leave. I saw a flash of movement at the end of the street, a white and blue sedan moving slowly, right on time. The confrontation had taken almost exactly 15 minutes. I believe your transportation is arriving, I said, nodding toward the street. David and Chloe turned. The police cruiser pulled up to the curb behind David's car, the engine cut off. The driver's side door opened. A uniformed officer, a man in his 40s with a calm, professional demeanor, stepped out. He adjusted his duty belt and began walking up the path, his eyes taking in the scene. The well-dressed older woman in the doorway, the distraught couple on the porch, the line of moving boxes on the manicured lawn. David's face was a mask of pure, undiluted panic. Chloe's was frozen in furious, silent outrage. The officer reached the foot of the porch steps. Good morning, he said, his voice neutral. I'm Officer Reynolds. I received a request for a civil standby at this address. Is there a problem here? I remained in the doorway. The officer's neutral question hung in the air between us. David opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Chloe found her voice first. Officer, thank God you're here, she said, her tone switching to one of frantic concern. This is my mother-in-law. She's having some kind of episode. She's locked us out of our own home and put our things on the lawn. She's clearly not well. Officer Reynolds' eyes shifted to me, assessing. He did not react to her claim. Ma'am, he said, inviting my version. I spoke clearly, looking directly at him. Officer Reynolds, I am Eleanor Washington. This is my home. I am the sole owner, as confirmed by the deed in my possession. These two people are my son, David Washington, and his wife, Chloe. They were guests in my home. I have revoked that invitation as of last night. Their personal effects have been removed. They are now refusing to leave my property, which constitutes trespassing. I have already filed an informational report regarding their attempted financial fraud against me. The case number is 44,782. I recited the facts without inflection. The officer nodded slightly, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. "Do you have identification, Mrs. Washington?" "It is inside. I can retrieve it." "That won't be necessary right now. Sir, ma'am, can I see your IDs?" David fumbled for his wallet, his hands shaking. Chloe snatched her purse and produced her license with a stiff motion. The officer noted their names. "David, is that correct that you were a guest here?" Officer Reynolds asked. "She's my mother," David said, the word bursting out with a mix of anguish and entitlement. "This isn't being a guest. This is my home, too. She can't just throw us out." "The legal status is that of a guest," I interjected calmly. "He is not on the deed. He does not contribute to the mortgage or pay rent. He and his wife arrived for a visit 4 days ago. I have the right to revoke permission for anyone to be on my property at any time." "That is correct in principle," the officer said, looking at David. "If you're not a tenant with a lease and the property owner asks you to leave, you are required to do so. Remaining after being asked is trespassing." "But she's not in her right mind," Chloe insisted, her voice rising. "She's paranoid. She's making up wild stories about fraud. We were only trying to help her plan for her future. She's an elderly woman living alone. She's confused." Officer Reynolds looked at me again. "Mrs. Washington, you mentioned a report of attempted fraud. Can you elaborate?" "Certainly. 2 nights ago, I overheard them in my kitchen discussing a plan to have me declared incapacitated in order to obtain power of attorney. Their stated goal was to gain control of my assets, specifically this house, to sell it and place me in an assisted living facility. I have a sworn affidavit to that effect, executed yesterday in the presence of my attorney, Alan Barrett. I also have a copy of my new will, executed yesterday, which disinherits my son due to this attempted fraud. I can provide you with my attorney's contact information and the case number from my police report." My speech was measured, precise, and utterly damning. Every detail was factual and verifiable. The officer wrote in his notebook, "The difference between Chloe's emotional accusations and my calm recitation of evidence was stark." "These are lies!" Chloe shrieked. "She's twisted everything. David, say something!" David was staring at me, his eyes hollow. You really did all that? You went to a lawyer? You called the police on me?" "You left me no choice," I said, my gaze meeting his. "You were not planning for my future. You were planning my erasure. I am simply preserving myself." "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered, the words barely audible. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "It never is," I replied. Officer Reynolds closed his notebook. "Mr. Washington, Ms. Washington," he said, using Chloe's last name, a deliberate separation. "The situation is clear. Mrs. Washington is the legal property owner. She has asked you to leave. You are now required to gather your belongings and depart. If you refuse, you will be subject to arrest for trespassing. Do you understand?" "You're taking her side?" Chloe spat. "Can't you see she's sick?" "My role is to uphold property law and keep the peace," the officer said, his tone becoming firmer. "I am not a medical professional. I am observing a property owner who is articulate, has documentation, and has made a prior report. You have presented no evidence to counter her claims except verbal assertions. The law requires you to leave. Now." He took a step back, placing a hand on his radio, a silent signal of the next step if they resisted. David seemed to collapse inward. All the fight drained out of him. He looked at the boxes, at his wife's furious face, at the officer, and finally at me. In his eyes, I saw the final, terrible understanding. He had gambled everything and lost. He had underestimated the quiet woman with the silver hair, and now he had nothing. "Come on, Chloe," he said, his voice dead. "Let's just go." "No, this is not over." Chloe turned to me, her finger pointing. "You think you've won? You're a bitter, lonely old woman who just lost her only family. You'll die alone in this house. I hope it's worth it." Her words were meant to wound. They bounced off the armor of my resolve. "My future is no longer your concern," I said. Please leave my property." David was already walking toward the boxes, bending to pick up 2 of them. He carried them to the car, his movements robotic. Chloe stood fuming for another moment, but under the officer's impassive gaze, she finally snatched up the 2 suitcases, dragging them awkwardly down the path. Officer Reynolds supervised as they made several trips, loading the boxes into their car's trunk and back seat. It took about 10 minutes. The neighborhood watched from behind windows. No one came outside. When the last box was loaded, David stood by the driver's side door. He looked at the house, at me still standing in the doorway. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. He got in the car. Chloe slammed her door so hard the vehicle rocked. The engine started. They backed out of my driveway. The car paused at the end of the street, then turned and disappeared from view. Officer Reynolds walked back to the porch. "They're gone, Mrs. Washington. Do you have any reason to believe they'll return?" "I do not believe they will," I said, "but if they do, I will call immediately. That's the right course of action. Keep your doors locked. You have my card with the case number. Follow up with your attorney." He paused. "For what it's worth, you handled a difficult situation very properly. Documentation is everything." "Thank you, officer." He gave a short nod, walked back to his cruiser, and drove away. I stood on the porch, the morning sun warm on my skin. The lawn was empty except for a few faint indentations in the grass where the boxes had sat. The street was quiet again. I looked at my house. It was mine. Wholly, completely, legally mine. I took the new key from my pocket. I stepped back inside. I closed the door. I turned the lock. The sound echoed in the silent hallway. It was over. I stood with my back against the door for a full minute. The silence of the house was not empty. It was full. It was the sound of absence, but also the sound of space reclaimed. I listened to it. I heard the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the mantel clock. No other sounds. I pushed away from the door and walked to the kitchen. I filled the kettle with fresh water. I set it on the stove. I took down my favorite teacup, a simple white one with a thin blue rim. I selected a chamomile tea bag. The actions were rituals of normalcy, anchoring me in the present. The kettle whistled. I poured the water. I carried the cup to the living room and set it on the side table. I did not sit yet. I went to the front window and looked out. The driveway was empty. The lawn showed only faint temporary depressions. The street was as it always was. A car passed. A dog walker moved along the sidewalk. The world had not changed. My small corner of it had been violently altered, then restored. I picked up my phone. I called Myra. She answered before the first ring finished. "Well, they're gone. The police came. They left." A long exhale crackled through the line. "Are you okay? Really okay?" "I am intact," I said. It was the most accurate word. "The house is mine. The locks are new. The documents are in order. They are driving away, presumably to a hotel." Did he say anything? David? He said he was sorry. It was not supposed to be like this. I repeated his words without inflection. "Too little. Too damn late," Myra muttered. "And the she-devil?" She predicted I would die alone in this house. Then she left. Charming. What did the police say? They confirmed the law. They supervised the departure. They gave me a card. It is done. There was a pause. I could hear Myra breathing, thinking. What are you going to do now? I am going to drink my tea. Then I am going to call Alan Barrett to confirm the completion of the matter. Then I will call the storage facility and cancel the unit. I do not need it. Do you want company? I can be there in 10 minutes. Not today, I said, and my voice was gentle but firm. Today, I need to be alone in my house. I need to feel it is mine again. Tomorrow, perhaps. Understood. I'm on standby. Call me for anything, even at 3 a.m. I will. Thank you, Myra, for everything. Always. I ended the call. I placed the phone back on the table. I finally sat in my armchair. I lifted the teacup. The warmth seeped into my hands. I took a sip. The flavor was mild, soothing. I looked around my living room. Everything was in its place. The empty frame on the mantel, the books neatly shelved, the sunlight falling in a clean rectangle on the rug. It was all as it had been, yet entirely different. The violation had been scrubbed away, but the knowledge of it remained, a stain on the memory of the space, not on the physical space itself. I finished my tea. I then did what I said I would do. I called Alan Barrett. His assistant put me through. "It's finished," I told him. "They are gone. The police ensured their departure." "Excellent. And you have secured the premises?" "New locks are installed. I am the only key holder." "Good. I will file your affidavit with the county clerk tomorrow to create a public record. I will also send a formal letter to David and Chloe on law firm letterhead, reiterating that they are not to contact you or approach your property, and that all future communications must go through this office. This will further establish a paper trail in case of any harassment." "That is wise. Thank you, Alan." "It's my job, Nora. A sad one, but necessary. You should consider changing your phone number and perhaps installing a security camera at the front door. It is a simple deterrent." "I will take both suggestions under advisement. Then my work, for now, is done. The rest is living. Take care of yourself." I called the storage facility next. I canceled the unit. The clerk was polite, incurious. Another transaction completed. I stood up. I carried my teacup to the kitchen and washed it, drying it and putting it back in its cupboard. I moved through the house, not with purpose, but with reacquaintance. I went to the guest room. I opened the door. The bare mattress, the empty closet, the silent air. I closed the door. I would deal with that room later. Perhaps I would turn it into a proper library with a reading chair and a better lamp. I returned to the living room. I sat again. The afternoon sun had moved, the rectangle of light stretching longer across the floor. I thought about Chloe's last words, "You'll die alone in this house." It was meant to be a curse. I examined the idea. I was alone. This was a factual statement. I had been alone, in the sense of without a partner, for over 20 years. I had raised a child here, and then he had grown and left, which was the natural order. His recent betrayal was an aberration, a shocking corruption of that order. But the aloneness itself was not new. It was a condition I had managed, even nurtured at times. Dying here? It was as good a place as any. Better than most. It was a house filled with my history, my choices, my labor. It was safe and paid for. The idea of being taken from it, processed through legal documents and deposited in a sterile room among strangers, that had been the true terror. That had been their plan. Alone was preferable. Alone was sovereign. I was not naive. There would be consequences. The grief currently held at bay by adrenaline and procedure would likely surface. There would be moments of wondering what David was doing, if he was okay, followed by a fierce, defensive anger. There would be social explanations to navigate, the curious neighbors, the mutual friends who would hear a skewed version. I would need to tell my story or not tell it on my own terms. That was work for the coming weeks. But for now, in this quiet, I felt a profound and simple relief. The threat was gone. The mechanism I had built, of law, of documents, of decisive action, had functioned perfectly. I had not screamed or begged. I had outthought them. I had protected what was mine. As dusk began to gather, I turned on a single lamp. I did not feel like cooking. I would have toast later or perhaps soup. It was enough. I reached into my pocket and took out my key ring. I slid off the old, now useless keys for the front and back doors. I held them in my palm for a moment, these pieces of metal that had represented access and trust. Then I placed them in a small ceramic dish on the entryway table. They were artifacts now. On the key ring remained only the new keys. They were bright, unmarked. I ran my thumb over their teeth. They were sharp. They were mine. I slipped the key ring back into my pocket. Its weight was familiar, but its meaning was new. It was not just a set of keys, it was a conclusion. The house was quiet, the doors were locked. I was inside. I was home.